Hey everyone, and welcome to another Salt Project Community Open Hour. Can everybody see my screen, first of all, that I'm
Yep,
sharing?
no
Yes,
problems.
awesome. The new computer's working well. It's December 15th, 2022. Thank you for taking the time to be here on a busy work week. I know everyone's trying to kind of get their stuff done as we inch ever closer to the holidays. I know everyone is working next week, but not really working next week. I get it. I know how it goes. So here's where you can find us. Salt Project is all over the place. I dare say we're ubiquitous. You can find us on YouTube, GitHub, Slack, Twitch, Reddit, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. Yep, those are still things, and yep, we're still doing it. And you can also find us at the Hacks Podcast, and that is available wherever fine podcasts are listened to. Here's what we're doing today here at Salt Project Community Open Hour. We've got your usual updates. Again, pushing the website and the e-store. Thank you, Elisa Rock. I'm thanking you in advance for providing us a Docs working group update. That working group is doing some fantastic stuff, by the way. Really excited about what they're doing. And then Garrett Greenaway, who is a rock star, the guy's in Cooperstown, we all know this. He's going to be talking about some bug fixes he's been working on as well. And then the Nick time, the Q&A. So let's get right to it. Open hour every first and third Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Pacific time, 11 to noon Mountain time. You can do the math from there. I think you get it. Thank you very much to all of you, whether you're watching this live or virtually, for a fantastic 2022 with Salt Project. We've had a great year. Big things are in store for next year. I'm getting a lot of questions, even still. This happens multiple times a week about SaltConf. Will there ever be another SaltConf? I don't know if we'll call it SaltConf, but we have had some movement. That's all I'm prepared to say, is we've had some movement, and we are working very, very hard at bringing another SaltConf type event to you. And as soon as I have some more information, I'll tell you that. I just want to make sure that everyone in the community knows that we are working on it. It has never disappeared from the radar screen, and we're doing our best to make that happen. This will be our last open hour of the year. Sad trombone moment, I know. Our last community open hour of the year, our next one will be on January 5th, 2023. And in the meantime, while we're waiting to get back together again, I'd like to encourage all of you to join a Salt Project working group. There's a bunch of them. The security working group, shout out to Barney. He's done a great job with that working group as well. Of course, the Docs working group, the Windows working group, there's a bunch of them. Go to saltproject.io / well, just go to saltproject.io. It's easy to see. You'll find it there. Piece of cake. And speaking of which, we do have a brand new Salt Project website. It was built in conjunction with the Salt Project core team. I think it looks fantastic. It is a work in progress. We're going to be adding and tweaking some more things, but I'd invite you all to go take a look at it, check it out. Easier access to GitHub and the community calendar. It's easier for community members to get started, new Salt users to get started. And we're going to have a much heavier focus on multimedia for instruction, tutoring, information, which means you're going to see your Salt core team a lot more as we go forward. Which is always a good thing. I mean, look at them. They're fantastic. We want to see them more. Let's see here. Let's move on. Just in time for the holidays, I want to put this out one more time. We do have a new Salty store, new Salt Project e-store. There's all kinds of goodies in there. There will be more coming. And the reason I'm bringing this up is solely because I was hoping Nick Hughes would be in the meeting today. Because as I recall, Nick, you had a PR from, what was it, 2013 that you solved. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
It went all the way back to 2013. I challenged someone to solve this. You were the one that solved it and resolved it. And because of that, Nick, I'd like to invite you to go to the Salty store and pick out whatever you want, and then send me that. I'll send you some codes, basically. Tell me what you want. I'll send you some codes, and you can go grab your merch for free. So congratulations. Let's hear it for Nick Hughes solving his, round of applause for Nick Hughes for solving that PR from 2013.
Thanks, Chugga. You're a sweetheart.
Yeah, thank you very much. I know. All right, let's move on, shall we? First up, we have Elisa Rock with an update from the Docs working group.
All right, it's still showing the emoji from when I was clapping for Nick. Good job, Nick. All right. So the SALT Docs working group is growing. We are up to 4 standard regular members. We do have the occasional core team member that drops in to say hi, which we're always grateful for, but we're basically at 4 members right now. And each member is working on some exciting doc epics that will hopefully have a lot of value for the community and for the project. Let me talk about a couple of them. Most of them have gone through the planning stages and we're actually actively working on them right now. The first one I'm going to drop a link into if you want more information about the general goal of it. We're creating new standards to make the module documentation more useful and helpful. As part of that project, we've done a lot of research into what that should be, and now we're working on creating several kind of pieces of documentation to empower contributors to write module documentation that meets those quality standards. So we'll be providing the community with some templates that they can drag and drop into any new modules that get written or new functions that get added to a module. So you can hopefully drag and drop that in, and that will help you to have the kind of content we'd like to see. And we'll also have a supporting document that tells you how to fill out that template in a high quality way. And of course, we'll be reviewing your documentation to make sure that it meets those examples or those guidelines. And then we'll also be providing at least one high quality example of the kind of documentation we would like to see in the project. So I'm really excited about this project and think it'll be super helpful. Later, as part of that project, we'll work on an initiative to get most of the important modules, the high priority modules, into compliance with these new standards. And that might involve some sort of community event, like a community docs event. We haven't worked out the details of what that would be, but that's kind of what we're thinking about for that project. It's going to be really exciting. The next project that is being worked on by a member of the group is the new docs landing page. We're basically conducting a lot of user research and interviewing stakeholders to develop SALT's user personas, meaning the different types of people who use SALT and what needs each of those different types of users have. Then we'll design a new docs landing page that will help those segments of users to quickly and easily find what they need from the SALT docs based on what we discover in our research. And then lastly, we have a new community member based in Singapore. See, we're a global project, so exciting. That's going to be working with okay, pause for a second. I'll talk about the Windows for SALT onboarding guide in a second. But got a question in the chat about what are examples of personas. That's a term that you'll hear in marketing and UX. A persona means a type of user. So, and I don't know if you're asking what are the types of SALT users that we have, but we'll unveil those later to the community, and you can let us know if you think we're on target or not. But yeah, things like the junior admin who is new to SALT and new to tech, and then we also have like a more senior admin who might be very well advanced in tech but new to SALT. Those kinds of segments of personas, if that's what you're asking about. You can ask a more clarifying question if you want. Okay. Again, I just posted the link for the final epic that is being worked on by a member of the Docs working group, which is a Windows for SALT onboarding guide. We want to make it easier for Windows users to onboard with SALT. And to create this guide, we'll probably collaborate with the Windows working group and work to consolidate the existing guides into one source of truth to verify that the process is correct and just ensure that it's as user-friendly as possible. So that one is still in the planning stages. It just barely got started, but I'm excited for that one too. So how can you help? If short of joining our documentation group and doing your own work, how can you help us? We are hoping to give a targeted survey, meaning like we want to target who we give the survey to a select group of SALT community members and users in January. And the purpose of this survey is to gather a little bit of research, but also to be able to do a before and after comparison, like what is the feeling about the docs we're working on before we implement our changes, and what's the feeling after? Did we make a difference? Was our work successful? So that's the purpose of that survey. And then more importantly, we're looking for SALT users to do 30-minute interviews with us about how you use SALT. That's for the docs landing page project, but potentially the module one as well. We'd like to discuss with you how you use SALT. What were your pain points in your journey as you were first learning SALT or teaching other people to use SALT? Like, what pain points do you see other people have? And what pain points have you had if you've been using the SALT docs that we could possibly solve for you? So lots of ways that you can help, even if you're not a member of our working group. And if you would like to get involved, feel free to send me a DM on the SALT community Slack, or you're welcome to just ping me in the hashtag documentation channel on the SALT community Slack. That's probably the best way to reach me. And yeah, let me know if you want to help. All right, that was a mouthful, and that's it for me, Chunga.
Well done. Fantastic.
Hunter posted his email too to volunteer.
Oh, great. Thank you, Hunter.
I've got a couple of other, I actually joined the community here. I'm part of a team that's been using SALT for about 5 years. I'm the senior sysadmin on my team. I'm joining because we've hit 1, 2, 3, 4. We've hit 5 pain points with SALT overall. One of them is docs.
Yes.
And so
as I would imagine.
I'm hoping to participate to try and drive improvements there. The one that my manager wanted me to make sure that I brought up today is in the SALT states reference. I'm at latest ref states, all SALT states. There are frequently examples that show what they would look like in a YAML file. However, they're organized by as if you were calling them from Python.
Yep, that makes sense. I could see that. So,
now, I understand that I'm a Python person, so I understand that this is coming from probably what is it? Oh shit. I forgot the name of it. But anyway, I'm sure this is coming from the documentation that's written into the code. But this is the least useful way to start the docs. I don't mind it being organized this way, but we never call this code as code. We always call it from YAML, and that
makes a lot of sense.
That needs to be. That's the easy pain. I mean, I'm sure it's the most complicated thing in the world to change, because I'm sure that's a foundational part of your doc creation process. But that's a formatting issue that I think needs to be addressed.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback. I don't want to take up too much time until we get to Q&A, which we're welcome to talk even more.
Hey, Lisa, by all means, if we want to address that here, that's fine.
No worries.
We're glad Hunter's here asking these kind of questions, and if you want to address it here, that's great. And while you're answering that, I just want to put this out there that based on what Elise is asking for here, there's a very real chance I may be approaching you to be in customer testimonial videos as well. So we may ask you to become a rock star in your own right and help us with SALT in that way and get your message out as well. Speaking of personas and community events and things like that.
I can participate at a certain level, but I am a government contractor. And so any sort of video or thing like that would have to go, you would have to narfle the Garthon at least twice.
We'll pixelate you. To make it even more cool, right? No, I get it. I totally get it. I'm talking about everybody on a broader sense, but yeah, I totally understand where you're at. So, Elise, if you would please continue. We'll just go.
Yeah, let's Hunter, talk about that, Chunga, because that's the first I've heard about it. But
could you share that link, Hunter? A URL to those docs you're looking at?
The link that I'm specifically on right now. There's one particular section that we had trouble with. We finally got the feature working. Was the accumulator. I think this is an unsung feature of Salt that solved a critical problem for us. I'm hoping in the spring it'll solve another critical problem with our firewall. But looking at the Salt docs, I could not make it work. I couldn't. What I did was Google search led me to a person who had created a very different style of documentation for the accumulator and accumulated states. And I got that working off of his blog post. One of the things on my to-do list is to convince somebody in the Salt world to incorporate that blog post or the bulk of that blog post into the Salt documentation for the accumulator, because the blog post lays out exactly what to do and how to do it. The functional guide here really doesn't.
I am the person to talk to about that. So let's definitely chat about that. And I also have some, continue.
So I've got at least a blog post that I can bring. I didn't write it, it's not mine, but I can at least bring that blog post content to what needs to change and improve in order to make this documentation more universally useful.
All of these things are awesome. I love it. And I'm happy to do all of this and to collaborate with you on this.
Wonderful.
So yes.
Send me an email. I will hook you up with a set of exact links.
Okay.
I can even I'll excise anything confidential, and I can send you what the working code that we got working to include back.
Sounds good. Thank you, Hunter. I did want to mention one last thing on the particular link that you shared from like just now in the chat, which is that this exact state module, the file module, is the one we were thinking of doing our golden documentation example for, because it tends to be one of the modules that most people need to use or touch, and especially beginning users need to use at some point. So the file one is the one that we identified as, let's get this one into the best possible state to use as an example. So
please, I completely agree with that. The file and service or the service one is the two that you always start with.
Okay, no, let's do them both, right? Yeah, I like it. Okay, cool. That's awesome feedback, Hunter. And for everybody, I always appreciate feedback just like that on the docs that helps us to know where the pain points are, because there's a mountain of work to do with the Salt docs. There's so much that needs to be improved about them. And so it's nice to know what is the biggest pain point. And let's tackle the biggest pain points first, make sure that we resolve those pain points and then move on to the next. So I totally appreciate this kind of feedback. So thanks, Hunter. So
you're quite welcome.
Okay. Sorry for monopolizing your meeting, Chunga. It's back to you.
It is our meeting. It is not my meeting. And this is fantastic stuff. This is exactly what I'd hoped to do here, what we could do here at open hours. So moving right along, Gareth Greenway, he's been waiting patiently to talk about some bug fixes he's been working on. It's all yours, man.
Yeah, thanks, Chunga. All right, so I don't know if you can click on that link if it works, Chunga, or I can share and we can walk through this.
Yeah, I just unshared. Why don't you go ahead and share, and then we'll go that way.
Sorry, the Zoom window keeps disappearing. Sharing. Okay. All right, so this particular issue, I just wanted to kind of walk through it, what the issue was, what the fix was, just because I found it kind of interesting. If for anyone that's worked in as a contributor to SALT and just kind of works with the state system, particularly the aggregate system. So this was a bug that was filed back in 2019 that took a bit to fix, but with like over 2,000 issues, sometimes it takes us a while to get to certain issues. But this one was with the IP table state, particularly when you're using aggregation. So for those not familiar with aggregation, I believe it's only available in 2, possibly 3 states at the moment where it really makes sense. But what it allows you to do is if you have a, for example, like the package state, if you have like a collection of packages in individual states, and you want to, normally like when the state runs, it would go through each one and run the install, check if there's an update, move on to the next one, blah, 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 in a serial manner. So what the aggregate allows you to do is, or the state aggregate, collect all those package states and run them in one kind of fail swoop. So run them against whatever package tool, if it's apt, yum, DNF, whatever the underlying package system is. This Salt will go ahead and collect all of them in like a big list, pass them along to the packaging system, and then install them. And so we have a similar one for IP tables. So IP tables works in a similar way. So if you have individual IP tables rules to find the states, normally it would go through and add each one. It can kind of be slow, both the package state and the IP table state when they're doing this kind of action. And so the IP table state works in a similar way. So it gathers up all of the states and then passes them all together against the IP tables binary and then adds them all into the same time. So it radically speeds things up. My cat is joining me. So this particular bug, again, it existed since 2019. And I guess at some point, the reporter, who is actually one of our former Salt Stack, current VMware coworkers, reported this, saying that he was getting this error of maximum recursion depth exceeded when comparing these states. And so if we scroll down, we'll see like a bunch of tracebacks that he was seeing as it was gathering up all of the state files. And so at some point, somebody, various people looked at it. So Wayne is on the call. He took a look at it. I think someone else, former Open Team member, now a member of our enterprise team, Joe Ecott, also looked at it. So a bunch of people have kind of gone back and forth. And I suspect, as I did starting off, first step you look at is the state system. Like, what is going on with the state system, particularly the aggregate code. And so at some point, I think it was Joe, I don't know if I can find it, added a PR, a pull request against Salt to basically go and look and see and detect if it runs into one of these recursive issues and just kind of like clean up the state that's generated. And that worked. It solved the issue. It didn't generate this big traceback, but it led to a different issue. So I have just a couple Docker containers here where I was kind of going to demonstrate what the issue was. So if we look at this really simple state, so these are a bunch of IP table states that are going to run. And I already have the state aggregates feature enabled. So these are going to run in an aggregated state. So they'll run all together. So if I run that state file on this host, it takes a little while. And you can see it did in fact run them in an aggregated way. So the first state ran all three, whoops. The window, grabbed all three IP table states and ran them in parallel as part of the one state, and then outputted like all three states were run. And so then the second two, because it goes and checks it and looks to see, hey, is this IP table state already in place? They didn't need to run. But if we scroll up a little bit, we'll see that we're getting this caught circular reference in data structure below, cleaning and continuing execution. So we're getting on each state that's run. And while it did run and it ran in an aggregated way, it's still producing an error. So one of the things that I looked at, so again, like most people, I think most of us that look through this, I spent a good day kind of going through the state system and the aggregate system in particular. And if you've ever looked at the salt state system, it's very powerful, but it's very headache inducing because you can get lost really easy, particularly
You're
if you're
looking
looking
for
at
the word convoluted.
well, I was trying to be diplomatic. But yes, it is somewhat convoluted, particularly when you dive into like requisites and other pieces. So I spent quite a bit of time kind of diving through the state system, trying to kind of trace this out. And then I realized the problem was actually in the IP tables module or state module itself, particularly the mod aggregate function. So if anyone's using any like sort of custom state modules or anything, this would be how you would allow that state module to work in like an aggregated way. You would add a mod aggregate function. So this is the one in particular for the state module or the IP table state module. So one of the things that I noticed was, so this particular one is receiving what we call a low state. And so this case, it's each individual state. So this runs for each state, assuming that the criteria is met. And then chunks is all the other states that are being processed by SALT at that time. And then running is the states that are currently in a running state. So what it'll do is it'll basically loop through all of the current states that are not in a running fashion that we can see here. Generate a tag, and you'll see this like littered throughout SALT, this gen tag. And assuming it's not running or in an already running state, it'll basically look and see, hey, is this one that is this an IP table state for one? Is ag already in the chunk? If it is, we've already done it. We've already aggregated it, so we can continue on. Assuming it's not the same, assuming it's a different function. Assuming it's the same function, because we all like append and insert, we only want to aggregate them together. It'll go ahead and add the current chunk that is in the list to the rules for the low state that were generated. So if we look back at the IP table state, when it's processing this first one, it's going to go through and check all the other states. So in this case, there's only 3, but if I had other states like package and service and like other ones in there, it would run through all of them that SALT is currently processing and make sure, look for other IP tables, in this case, IP tables append states. So it'll find these 2, and then it'll add them into a additional parameter for the IP table state called rules. And then carry on. And assuming rules is populated, it'll go ahead or it'll add them to this rules list. Assuming rules has content in it, is like a full list. If it already exists, it'll go ahead and extend it. If not, it will just set the low states rules parameter to the contents to the rules. So if we just add this little debug message, clear this out, we should see, it should be kind of obvious like what's going on here. So if we look at, so this is our first state, and here's our error log. So for each one of these, we're getting rules, and rules is a list. So if we go back to what that is, rules only has one list. Just jumping ahead, I know this already, so I'm cheating a bit. Oops, that didn't work. Actually, no, it did. So if we look and see, so I went ahead and printed out the rules, the first element. And so this has all the rules that got added. Curiously, it also has a rules in there. Oops. Kill that. So if we look at what that looks like. So here's rules, and again, like it's a list, and this also has a rules. Oops. So we'll just do one more. So if we look again, so this is like another level. So again, it's a list, and there's another rules. So essentially what was going on here is it was taking chunk for each, like each chunk it's looping through, and it's adding it. But chunk is also, this chunk as it's looping through is also like one of our low states. And so for each time it's looping through the chunks, it's adding the rules to the low state, which is one of the chunks. And so it's just like recursively adding it and eventually like complaining because it's reached like the limits of what we are able to do. So switching over to this guy. So what I did was, this is the fix that will be in 3006. If we are adding it to the rules that are going to get added to the low state, rather than actually using the reference to chunk, which is also a reference to the low state that we're passing in, we just do a deep copy on chunk, which is all the rules that we want to add to it. And so now when we run this, just clear that out. We'll see it ran it in a aggregate state, but it didn't actually produce those errors. And it's not super fast because I only have 3 states, but if you had like a ton of states that you were running this through, it would be significantly faster because it's not having to deal with that recursive situation that we were dealing with before. And that's basically it. I don't know if anyone has any questions about this or just in general.
This
that was cool.
Yeah, this is really cool. I dare say this deserves another round of applause for Gareth, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, that's fantastic. Thank you, Gareth. Thank you very much.
Hey, go ahead and pick something out of the store that you want, Gareth, and I'll get you a code.
Thanks, Shane. Appreciate it. I mean, it's not as great as an accomplishment as Nick. It was only like 2019, not 2013, but
very cool. Very cool. Just the same. And speaking of which, I'm glad you brought it up, Shane, because we are going to start giving away prizes here on Open Hour for doing cool feats of skill and talent. And Gareth, I think that rose to the occasion. So again, sir, why don't you head to the store and pick out something you like and let me know, and I'll send you a code for doing that great demo for us. Well done, man. Okay, so as Gareth was saying, it is Q&A time. So if anybody has any questions, I like to call it Nick time. If anybody has any questions, now would be the time to ask them. So go for it.
I've got 2 today.
Fire away, man.
All right. So Q number 1 is an issue that I just put in, 63328. Just looking for some input on maybe the best way to implement this that's actually gonna make it through. So essentially what's happening is, we have a customer that is using Salt and they're taking over some running systems, and there's requisites in place so that when config files change or unit files change or whatever, we're going to be restarting services. Unfortunately, some of the changes that are being made are not relevant to the actual operation of the files, such as white space changes, removal of comments, because we're taking something under like a generic template as opposed to having something that's like heavily commented and bespoke. And then sometimes like reordering of options, thinking like the location of a specific SSHD config in the file, right? Like it doesn't matter to the operation of that file. It just needs to be set. So when those things change, some of the services that we're interacting with, are being restarted, and it can cause some issues in the environment. So essentially, what I'm asking for is some sort of way to say like, hey, white space changes are okay, or hey, if it's just a comment, I don't care, and then maybe either suppress the changes notification or otherwise sort of break the relationship to the requisite so that things don't get triggered off of that. And obviously this is, not the type of behavior that would be something that we would want to enable by default, but I think that it has value, especially in scenarios such as ours, where we're sort of like taking over existing infrastructure. So I'm really looking for some guidance on the best way to do that so that we can actually, merge it in and we aren't having to, have our own implementation, because that's essentially the point that we're at right now, right? Like we need this functionality, and it's either going to make it in upstream, or, we're going to be maintaining a fork or, a special module, and nobody wants to do that. But I don't think this is a single customer type of problem, right? Like other people probably run into this. It's just maybe they don't have a large enough environment for it to be a huge problem for them. And they might be able to inspect the test output, or make changes one by one in order to bring things into spec. But we just don't really have that option in this particular environment. So any thoughts on that?
So just to clarify, you're looking for some way for the file managed states to basically coexist with some other either manual or automated management of files, config files.
Yeah, I mean, not like necessarily coexist. In this case, it's a takeover, right? So there was a previous configuration management system, and maybe some manual processes, or maybe like, think an ecosystem where there was a bunch of just like flat files representing unit files, but we wanted to templatize those so that, maybe we could just pass parameters in to the service definitions for systemd. And then we're obviously going to like lose specific comments and things like that, or maybe there's like 2 empty lines in the original flat file, but now we've reduced that to 1 or something. Something that's not relevant to the actual operation of it. So if we were to inspect that diff and say, like, oh well, this is just an empty line, and that's all, right? We don't care about that. Or, hey, the diff here is just lines with comment characters on it, or something, right? Like I don't know the best way to go about it, or if there's any libraries out there that kind of do this that we could leverage. But that's kind of the outcome that we want, right? Is that, I want some way to say that there's some types of changes that I just don't want to trigger a requisite on.
So I can't speak to the whole part of that. Relatively recently, my team took over a bunch of web servers, and so we were importing HTTP config. Those files tend to be very, very long with relatively few changes in them. In order to expedite that process, I wrote the world's nastiest shell scripts, about 3 of them. And what it did was it stripped all the comments and reduced all the white space down to a single character. So, 5 space characters would become 1. That maintained the validity of the file, but it stripped out any excess changes. And then there were a couple of files, I don't remember what they were, but they were like user lists. In addition to those, I sorted them. And what that did was that gave us the smallest possible diffs when the human was actually looking at how is web server A configured differently than web server B. Unfortunately, that's all I came up with.
Yeah, and that's kind of my point, right? It becomes a user problem. You have to solve for all this stuff prior to actually having Salt do its job.
We didn't find a way out of that. If you do, let me know.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm suggesting right now. I'm willing to write this PR. I just don't want to go down a road and say like, this is my solution to it and have it get kicked down the road. And say, no, we're not going to merge this in. So I'd love to talk it through with, the folks that are jamming the merge button to see what is possible.
Would something like being able to sub out the change detection to like being able to call a Salt module, like an execution module like slots? And then you could just plug in whatever script you want to run to say, yes, this actually is a change or not. Like basically you feed out the diff from the state into this module, and your module calls whatever script you've written to interpret the diff to see whether it actually is a change. Because obviously it's going to be highly context dependent, whether it's an Apache config file or like the user's going to have to do the work in terms of being able to detect whether it's actually a legitimate change, but at least this gives them the option.
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, there's value in integrating this functionality, right? Like I brought this up and we already had somebody say like, oh yeah, I ran into that too. So, saying that we're all going to have our own little like check scripts out there, it's not the best user experience. So if there's some way for us to integrate that functionality inside of Salt in a way that people can sort of opt into it, even if it's like I have to categorize what kind of context the file should operate in, right? Like if I have to say, hey, this is an Apache config, and there has to be a some sort of like diff parser or whatever we want to call it for that in order to enable that functionality. I mean, like that's a framework that we can live inside of. When somebody has to deal with a different file type and it's not currently handled, we would then write that functionality. So, if we can write this in a pluggable sort of frameworky type of way, and have this like list of, file types or, mechanisms that we're willing to ignore, I think that there's value in that.
I guess one of the things I'm struggling to see here is the use case. So if you have files that are managed by Salt, presumably those files are what that file should look like is in some sort of template somewhere, right?
Yes.
Okay. So is the problem that you're trying to solve? So like you have your template, for argument's sake, just say on your Salt master, Salt pushes it out. You need to make changes to it. You go to the Salt master, you either change values in Pillar or you change them in the states or you change them in the template itself.
He's onboarding new machines.
Right, no, I get that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, so is the issue that, okay, maybe I'm starting to see it. So the issue is that you have existing config files, you want to
Mhm.
bring them into the Salt Master.
Yeah,
make
so
changes
like
there?
a
Okay.
great scenario that we ran into was the system D unit files, right? So say we have two different services for two different applications, and maybe in the existing CM, each one of those is its own distinct file, right? So we have this file sprawl for every service. We have its own file, like either templated or not, sitting on this file system. We want to consolidate that to a single template, and that template basically takes in a data structure and creates the unit file output, right? So we pass in like some sort of dictionary or something like that, and so the main set of keys is like the unit section or whatever for the system D unit file. And then underneath of that are the key value pairs that go along with like this equals this, right? And so how our template is now interpreting that is going to dictate how things pop out on the system. And so if we had our own, specific unit files that had comments in it and all sorts of crazy stuff, we no longer get that because it's been genericized. And so when we lose comments, like we don't care, right? Like the service is still operating the same way. Or if there was a double line space or whatever, right? Like those are all things that aren't going to affect the way that service operates. So in those types of scenarios, when those are the only changes that have occurred, we would like to suppress the requisite trigger. And so that would, in my head, either mean like breaking the requisite process in some way, like raising a flag and saying, don't do that, or suppressing changes altogether in the state, which generally is frowned upon in SALT workflows, right? So I'm trying to figure out like what we could do that will be approved, because it's something that we see value in, and I think it's going to improve user experience in general for people that are taking over existing systems.
Do we not have like an ignore white space flag for like file.managed?
I thought there was something. I was trying to look for it and I thought it was there.
If not, it certainly seems like a reasonable feature that at least I'd support having added to SALT.
Yeah, ignore. There is one on.
And ignore comments
There's-
too would be, that's what he's kind of.
It looks like there is one on some of the functions. Yeah, okay, I do see where you're coming from now, Nick. So you basically you want to be able to manage those files, but you don't want to manage the files per se. You just want to manage the values in those files.
Yeah. And it's really like in this particular use case, it's a takeover type of scenario. And
you don't want to trigger a restart of your services or whatever when you're not functionally changing your config files.
yeah,
Right. The values are potentially going to be the same. Structure of the file may not be, because you're losing any like white space or comments that wouldn't be in the template. But because it's changing the file structure, it would trigger a restart.
yeah, and like it really only matters for the first run, right? Like the first time we run it, it's going to bring it into spec, and maybe the only thing that it changes are the white space and comments, and then the second time it runs, everything's fine, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to run clean anyway. We just need to like get it into spec quickly without having to do something that Hunter did, where he's having to manually modify all of these files prior in order to make sure that nothing gets restarted without cause.
Yeah, I was gonna say the other option there, and I don't know how comprehensive like test equals true, and it sounded like that's probably a similar scenario.
We
what
lived
you
and
said.
died by test equals true.
Yeah. But that's definitely a hackish way to get around it. If you're talking about a dozen or so files, it's not that bad to kind of manually do that. But I can definitely understand how, like, 100 config files across 1,000 servers. Yeah, don't want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, like even though we might be talking, since we're sort of rolling out, formula by formula, for lack of a better term, in the takeover, but it's like 5,000 systems, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to inspect that.
Yeah, understood. Yeah.
Okay.
I
Oh,
was
sorry,
just-
Wayne, go ahead.
I
Finish
was
your
just
thought
gonna
there.
ask if you had investigated any of the like ignore white space or ignore comments flags, and if that didn't, if that worked or didn't work, and if it didn't work, what, if you knew why it didn't work.
Well, the ignore white space is only there on the prepend and append
Mm, okay.
states.
So it sounds like really we just need to get that feature added to like file.managed.
I'm curious, have you looked into the IMI state module? Because
Yeah, there was some reason why we couldn't use it. I forget exactly what it was.
Which one?
INI manage.
Yeah, I know that certain modules have subtle behaviors, subtle behavioral quirks. Sometimes it's just, they were written 10 or 15 years ago, and that's it. They were just that's when they were written, and they hadn't changed much since then. And so a lot of the requisite functionality that we have nowadays wasn't even in place when they were built. And so a lot of the functionality that we would expect today, just it wasn't there. And so they really just need to be upgraded and modernized for today's salt. So sounds like file.manage is one of those where we would want to improve that quite a bit. I know that I hesitate to even bring it up, but I know that file.line exists, but that's one of those ones that has severely subtle quirks in different fun and exciting ways. And I would never point somebody to that intentionally, but for the sake of completeness, it's something that does exist. And as long as you're aware of the quirks and maybe are able to work around those, it may be something that that works for this use case. But I would bet that file.managed would be more likely to be appropriate there.
Okay,
Yeah.
so in the interest of time, I'll take a look at the code and dig in, because it sounds like we're open to it, and maybe I'll ping you guys to see what your thoughts are before I go too far down any roads.
Yeah, for sure.
And that way, I can sort of be a little bit, I don't know, feel better about the likelihood of the PR actually getting merged.
Yeah,
for
sure.
Well, as long as it's got changelog and attests.
Absolutely.
Yeah, changelog and the test don't necessarily have to be passing, and Shane will approve it.
Just have it.
And docs, don't forget docs.
Yeah, absolutely. I had someone recently ask me if there was any possibility of the open hour moving a little bit earlier in the day to accommodate like at least some folks in Europe. Is there any likelihood of that?
Well, there's always, anything is possible, Nick. This is your world. I'm just in it. So if people would like to move the open hour time, we can certainly entertain that. No, there's no time that's going to be convenient for everybody. It's a global operation, right? So what is good for one is not good for another, but it's definitely something that we can explore. And if anyone has any requests or would like to see that accommodated, you can hit me on Slack, or you're more than welcome to send me an email, schunga@vmware.com, and we can chat that way as well. So I'm pretty easy to find, and would love to talk to you about it and take your feedback. And if we get enough of it, then yeah, we can certainly accomplish that, no problem. So we're at time. Great open hour today. Thank you very much. Quickly, is there anyone that has a fast question that we have not been able to get to?
So why schunga? Why not Chunga?
It's a whole thing, man. It's a whole thing. You know why? Because someone in HR screwed up, to be perfectly honest. and I asked them to change it, and they said, yeah, that's going to be a whole thing, and it's too hard. So now you're schunga instead of Chunga. It's just that simple. I said, okay. It's the exact same reason, actually, that I don't have a picture, and I just have my name. I said, can I get a picture added to this thing? And they said, yeah, that's going to be too hard because of the schunga thing. So I don't know what happened there. I keep trying to stop. There we go. Anyway, long story short, that's why. So any other questions? No?
I haven't had a chance to go through the issues on GitHub yet. Does anybody know if there is a known issue with Red Hat systems and bridged network interfaces?
Which version of Red Hat?
We've seen the problem on 7, 8, and 9.
Okay,
And
I do know that there is an open issue. I know because it's assigned to me. To our networking states do not work well with if you're using Network Manager.
we are
That's in
since
play.
it's required in 9, I think that one's going to have to be one that maybe receives a little bit more attention.
Yeah, I was hoping to get to it for our SOLPA release, which is 2006, but I didn't. So I will definitely, hopefully, plan to get it for 3007.
Okay. Is that something you'd be willing to reach out to me for early testing on?
Yeah, for sure.
I posted my work email address in the chat. Hit me up. That one's
Okay.
We've been hitting that one for the last couple of years we use bridged interfaces on things that run KVM virtualization so that the VMs can see the outside network. And we pretty much have to manage those systems by hand. Salt takes one look at them, and the interaction with Network Manager is death on toast.
Yeah, I know it's been an open one for a while, and it's affected a few different systems.
Okay.
So.
Thank you, everybody.
And Hunter, it was great having you here. Great contribution to the community, and we hope to have you back, in January.
I'll be back.
anytime.
My goal is to engage with the Salt community until we get this this Post-it note that's hanging on my monitor that's got 6 things on it, till I can get them all crossed off. That's the goal.
Well, that's motivation not to fix it, because you'll keep.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. We're kind of clingy that way, Hunter. Now we're never going to fix it.
If we can get those items fixed, I promise to hang around and make what contributions I can. If Alyssa will send me her email to that work email, I'll follow up the blog post and the other stuff that we found out about the accumulator.
Yeah, Hunter, I sent you a direct message on Zoom asking if email is the only way to communicate with you, or if you're on the community Slack. But I will reach out to you by email. That's what I figured.
I can't get to Slack right now because of my security people, but I'm in an argument with them anyway. But if you'd email me, that would make life much easier.
Yeah, that's why I just asked, because I know government stuff can sometimes be tricky about Slack. So okay.
We're not insane. We're just joyfully eccentric.
I said tricky. So yeah, I agree.
All right, very good. Well, thanks again, everybody. Wayne, why don't you play us out, man?
So you may have heard this before. I think I may have used this one last year, but you know, there was this couple and they were walking around Washington DC, and you know, there was a tour guide that they were walking around with. He was actually an immigrant from communist Russia, and they were, you know, he was just showing them the sights of DC, and then started to precipitate, and the wife says, I think it's snowing here, and her husband said, no, I think this is rain. She goes, no, I'm pretty sure it's snow. And you know, their tour guide, he interjected, and he well said, yeah, it's you know, I've lived in Russia, been in Serbia, you know, I know where, or Siberia, I know snow from rain, and you know, so I'm pretty sure this is rain. And the husband turns to his wife and says, well, we better listen to him, because, you know, Rudolph the Red knows reindeer.
That was a long road to a very small house, Wayne.
Good night, everybody. Please tip our waiter. Try the veal.
Merry Christmas, happy holidays, everybody. We'll see you next year. Thank you very much for the contributions.
All right.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.